Okay, so what we have here is we had, from the last budget work session, 5 requested scenarios. As I worked through those, from Josie's notes, I did add a 6th that I thought seemed like it was sort of the compromise maybe of the first 5. So first page, you just see what I understood as the objective, right? We wanted to have that, we had talked about the average increase on an unimproved residential home, right? We did not finish a basement, we didn't add a second level, that kind of thing. We were talking about that across the board, the average increase would be 8.8%, right? And so we had talked previously about, let's have that, right? See that tax rate go down 4.4, and then make an equal contribution to fund balance was basically what we're trying to accomplish. And so then we've just got the basics of the 6 scenarios listed out, and I tried my best to be concise, so it's not nothing too overwhelming. And on that second page, we just list this out, right? Left to right, scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have the levy that was original. The original prelim levy was a little over 4 million. Then we see kind of that subsequent change. The next category of rows is tax rate and the tax rate change, right, from 2023, which is the current certified rate we're talking about. Then we got a third row, contribution to fund balance. In that category, we've, same as the change in tax rate, we really only, out of the 6 scenarios, only 4 have meet kind of the criteria that we were looking for that decrease in the tax rate and contribution to fund balance. And all of these, well, not quite all of them, but most of these scenarios require a transfer from the liquor fund. So I added that in for rows, what the transfer from the liquor store would be, that it's then to the general fund, and then what that would leave the liquor store as net cash flow, right? So understand that that's going to be after it's bought product and inventory, paid staff, but also covered debt service, and that's then also then after the expanded transfer to the general fund as well. And just kind of for perspective, all the years that I've been doing this here, we've basically never budgeted anything other than break even for the liquor store. This year, we started from, a static transfer of $350,000, and that left us with like $283,000 left over. It's really quite remarkable, and I don't really have any doubts that that's already conservative, to be honest. Just a couple, so I kind of touched on that. A couple points on some of these scenarios as I was working through them, things that come to my mind that I think council needs to know. Scenarios 1 and 2, just to be aware, if we forego plow truck and grader purchases, delivery on those is, you're probably talking 1 to 3 years additional, from the time you would actually want to do it. So if we said, we're going to skip 2024, we're going to queue something up we're going to queue up a plow truck for 2025, you can order it in 2025, but it's probably not coming until 2027. So there's some real consequence. If we end up with down plow truck and or grader, I suspect residents will notice, especially if we have a plow truck and grader go down, then everyone will notice really, really rapidly. Scenarios 1, 2, and 3, I'm a little hesitant to do a freeze on Fund 920, and this is because the capital improvement plan is a list of needs, right? And simply proving that we are cash flowing those needs. But fundamentally, knowing department heads understanding that their capital needs will be met gives them a certain incentive structure. When a department head understands that they get to the end of the year or when they get to the year that they're going to need something and it's going to be there will actually be cash there. If they feel like that is a certainty, not buying that plow truck for 1 more year, not buying that pickup truck for 1 more year, not buying the mower, not buying the makeup heater above the whatever room. Those types of things are easy to say, yep, it can make it 1 more year. I'm going to let it go 1 more year and see how it goes, because I know that if it breaks down halfway through the next year, I know I'll be able to have the funds to replace it. So we end up, and this is one of the things that I pick on Matt a lot, because he he oversees so much of the capital plan based on the number of departments he has. And when I first laid this out, one of the things he and I talked about was that we were going to assign useful lives as I've understood them in my career, but that as this plan works forward, we'll really genuinely find out what the useful life is, because he's going to have an incentive to let it go, right? Just because it's up for replacement at year 15, he knows that if he lets it go one more year, it's still going to be he's still going to be able to purchase it in year 16 or 17 or 18. And that's when you really start to find out what the real useful life of these items is. So I would rather not introduce uncertainty into that. Scenario 4, my only comment on that would be Public Works facility should not be removed unless it is genuinely never going to be done. If we are saying that it's way outside of 20 years, that's fine, but I would still want to have it on the plan. But it should be listed, right? So I even have, we might have like other facilities that maybe aren't, they aren't showing up in 20 years, but they're still listed, right? So a Public Works building should be listed even if it's not inside of the 20-year time horizon that is presented. Scenario 5, this was basically just, well, what if we contracted building services rather than having staff? This year, just by chance, as I'm projecting the revenues, it's pretty darn close to a break even. And it just happens to work out that way. Other years with more or less revenue, we would see a different outcome, but this year as it's sitting currently, that just happens to be darn near a break even.
I have a quick question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So in scenario 5, I see that you have the, like what you just said, the outsourcing of the building stuff. I see the transfer from the liquor store is still only $350.
Yep.
What would the difference be if we were to match, the 500-ish that the others are taking from the transfer from the liquor store into the general fund? Would that be like probably around a 3% reduction?
Well, you would still need, basically we would need to have, we need to add 166,650 to cover a reduction in the levy, right? And then we would also, if we wanted to meet that secondary goal of a contribution to fund balance, I would need, 163. So now we're already to roughly 320 on top of the 350. So now we're talking 670.
Okay.
Yeah, so it starts to get
dicey.
Yeah, we end up, we would end up with a negative cash flow. It wouldn't be by a huge amount, but it would be, that would be less than ideal.
So, but we could potentially maybe see a 2 or 3% tax rate change with maybe 550 out of the transfer from liquor store fund to sort of. So we could be anywhere between a 0.362% reduction and a 4%.
Yeah, it would
depending.
depend. It would depend how much emphasis you want to put on reduction in the tax rate versus contribution to fund balance.
Right.
Right. I mean, you could still try to split them 50-50 is what we talked about. We had a target tax rate and we want an equal contribution to fund balance. But you could you could press on one lever more than the other, and yeah. See, then we had, and then scenario 6. Scenario 6 is what I put together, and basically that was not asked for, but I thought, I'm going to put this out here since I'm the one who's staring at these numbers all day. Basically, I said, all right, what if I push the Public Works facility and the salt shed out 10 years, understanding that gets me past my next inflection point and gives me a few years of extra time to set money aside, rather than trying to take out the debt or the full balance, negative balance in Fund 438. We can do what we've done in other scenarios, which is just say, all right, we're going to chip away at it for 10 years, but we're just going to consistently do that. It's not going to affect any one budget a lot, but we'll just keep making progress and we'll get there. Then the other part of this is similar to scenario 1, getting rid of all the interns except for PRC. Just simply because the PRC one, with the amount of events that we have, I think that would be the most valuable intern if we were going to pick one. The other item here is we had, in scenario 1, we talked about removing peak packet management software. In my scenario, I instead suggested we remove NeoGov, which is the HR software. From my perspective, I think that the peak management software adds more efficiency and productivity than NeoGov. They're similar in price, so if we're gonna say we should get rid of one, I would keep the one that enhances efficiency and productivity first.
Can I
The other
ask
thing I'd
what
like
the
to add-
HR?
oh, I would just like to add about the Peak software, is that was also the primary reason for implementing it was not just to save staff time and getting that out. It was so the residents and anyone who wanted to see what we're doing as a city can actually search through our packets, because you never could find it. If you've ever looked for something, maybe at the county, you know how difficult it is to find. We used to be like that once upon a time. And now you can search and see our entire packets for every meeting.
Is that what the NeoGov HR software does?
Peak does what I just stated. The NeoGov HR is a platform to be able to put our application on and for people to apply for positions here.
Okay.
If I had to choose between the two, I would let the application software go and keep Peak.
Okay.
How does Katie feel about removing that NeoGov? Has anybody talked to her about that, or what that might mean for her job?
I did talk to her, and we both agreed that it was better to have information get out to our residents, which is something that happens every month, than to go with the application one.
Okay.
It does streamline her process. She does take time to do things, but to be honest, software takes time too.
Right.
And we only have one HR, and if she's not here, then someone else has to learn that software. So we feel that it was best to let that one go.
Okay.
What's the savings per year on that?
I'd have to double check, but they were both in
NeoGov
that ball. Each of those packets software packages were in the ballpark of 4,000, plus or minus a couple $3,500
$3,500 a year each one.
Yeah, we're not.
So I guess I have to see more work on it. The goal I thought was 347,000.
Yeah, my understanding was is that we were going to split the difference, and that 347 would have wiped out the full increase to 8.8, and that we were going to split it. Yeah, that we wanted to wipe out half of that, but still have a contribution to fund balance.
Right, but for a resident, if their value of their home stayed exactly the same, which it doesn't, I mean, but if it went up we thought at the time 11%, but that's actually not accurate, right? It's 8.8% is what an
Well,
unimproved property would go up.
When I take it's called the mini report. When I take the report that the county has filed with the state from March, with the initial property values that would be used for 2024, yes, that's where we ended up with.
So we ended up at 8.8.
That,
And
that's just for unimproved residential. So that would exclude anybody who added a second level or finished their basement or,
Right.
those types of things. But if your house is the same on 1/1 of 2022 as it's going to be on 1/1/2024, then you fit into that category, and your just market rate increase, just what you were subject to the market, your value went up 8.8.
But, and I can't remember, I'm trying to find that last sheet that we had, but that number to cover that was the 347?
Yes, if that was the only intent.
Okay,
So you could pull off the same here and say, we'll put nothing to fund balance, put it all to reducing the tax rate, and you would end up at 8.8.
okay. So that was kind of the other part of my next question, that's why I'd have to see the work, just to, because as you and I were having discussions, earlier this year, we were talking about moving the Public Works building out 15, 20 years, and we thought that alone could potentially save us about 100,000. And then, and I don't know if I'm off base on that now, or, but I know that when we did have that discussion, that was kind of where that was at. And then, if we have another 280,000 that we potentially could transfer from the liquor store, then we're at 380. And then if we talk about doing the Fund 920 freeze, I mean, that's a one-time savings that, we'd have to split. I guess that was another part of this equation, is what do the future years look like that we don't
Well,
really
see,
have to look at here,
So
but,
for example, we've got in scenario one, we had freeze on all 920 expenditures except for lighting, infill, and PD squads. So I really did put zeros in for 2024 and then rerun the cash flow and adjust the levy to make it, but for a one-year freeze, it doesn't move the levy amount for Fund 920 a lot. It goes down, but it's not
Not market.
a lot.
well, I mean, I
Still
thought you and
have
I
to-
talked about that that's an actual realized savings of, what, 700-ish thousand or so, because you're not gonna have some transfers in that you would have otherwise had, but, so then how does that not equate to, money that we can actually use to offset the tax rate. But I mean, I guess in my personal opinion, it's 347 or bust, right? I mean, I think that's gotta be the goal. And then how do we build that fund balance from there and maintain that tax rate going forward?
All right, so, see if I can read this and talk at the same time. So in 2024, if I just take, get rid of my zeros.
And I mean, realistically, I mean, maybe this is a conversation you and I could just schedule a meeting for too and just get into the weeds a little bit more. I don't know that everybody here wants to.
I think it's important to hear it
Okay.
Yep.
personally.
I don't know why that's not gonna filter. Did it freeze up? Is that what just happened?
Now, is that governmentjobs.com? Is that different than this NeoGov HR software?
Government jobs is
That's part of that platform.
that
would
part of
be-
that platform?
Yeah, that's like the online portal.
Okay,
So that's where everything would filter in through.
okay. So I have that at 2,639, but I don't know if that was one check or if that was half a year or what that was, but, and then
My recollection is it's like, I think we had a budget at like 45.
is it? Okay.
So I would.
That might
I
have been
imagine-
half of the payment, yeah. But then 438, not paying that off, was 75 grand.
I don't know what's going on. That icon should not look like that when I'm sitting on that. Maybe now. There we go. All right. So if we can kind of see. All right. So we kept, this is scenario one. We kept the squad cars in. We've got our lighting infill. Now we still have the Cambridge ICNA bike walk trail because that's already a contractual deal.
Well, and I think there was one other thing on the PD, it was the LETG management or maintenance, right? We have to do that too, right?
That could be, I may have overlooked that, yeah. But the scenario here, basically what I'm looking at here, when I come back and say, all right, where can I move this levy down to, right? Which is that number, well, God, that doesn't point very well. Right above, you see the 360? What I'm looking for is my next inflection point. And so that's right here, we're at 56. 56 is substantively ends up being zero over that many years. So that's the point where I say, okay, you know, how far can that levy go? And it's nothing more than set it to 370, see how it looks. Set it to 360, see how it looks. Set it to 350, oh, I'm negative. All right, let's go back. So there's not a lot of science on that, right? It's literally, do you have cash to pay for your stuff?
Yeah, I wish I could see it.
Is it not right there? That's my,
Well, I just,
That's-
it's just too small to see on the.
yeah. So in the end, at this point, what we are obligated to do is I have to certify a preliminary levy to the county by September 30th. I don't have to send anybody a preliminary budget, but I have to send them a preliminary levy. So if what we're looking at, we can say, I can, how about this? If at least one of those scenarios is like, yeah, that's doable, then we should start with, let's have that certified levy be the 3.923, whatever I got written up there. Say, all right, that's our starting point. Understand, yep, we can go lower, but if we're comfortable that we don't need to be higher than that, then we should just get to there, because we do need to meet those statutory obligations. You know, it's, you know, the reporting to the state, sending your levies in, sending your audit in, all those types of things are the kinds of things that if you don't do, they will come back to you next year and ask why you don't want your LGA. And that's kind of how those conversations go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I'm looking at it, I mean, we can work out the final budget, but I would say, let's set the final levy at 347,000 less than what the original preliminary budget was, so that we know that if your value, you know, you're not gonna pay any more than you did last year in real dollars. You know what I mean? And then we'll find a way to work within that, but I think I love that idea that you guys came up with, is that let's work this budget from backwards, you know, I mean, it's the opposite of how you normally would do it, is you say, okay, well, here's what we need, and then how do we go get it? It's, no, here's what we've been allowed to take, or here's where people have said they would like us to be. How do we work within that budget? I think that's a totally different way of looking at it than almost anyone else has probably looked at it. So I think that would be the goal that I think we should shoot for on the 19th, is that let's set this preliminary budget at 347,000 less than that, and then find a way to make it happen.
See, I guess, I mean, I had brought that idea up, and the more I listen to him talk and the more I think about what's gonna happen in the economy, I think the housing values are gonna tank, and what we're gonna see is we're actually gonna get less money in from taxes because the housing value tanks, and if we don't have any sort of cushion at all, then it's gonna be a huge increase that we're gonna have to demand from taxpayers to cover our costs, and it kinda makes us a little more, I guess, risky. Does that make, that make sense?
This goes back to the May 2nd meeting, right, where it's every budget affects every future budget.
Right.
And fundamentally, we're kind of talking about three levers, and the more you press on one, you introduce risk on the other. And so now, what is the balance for any council? That's for each council to decide, but it does go that way.
The only problem is when you say housing market tanks, that's selling your house. Your tax value does not go down. Nobody's taxes dropped when the housing market crashed. Nobody's taxes went down. That isn't gonna change that. That'll never change. It'll change what you get for your property, but it won't change your tax rate. It won't change what you're paying in taxes. That'll never change.
Sure.
And that's beyond
Right.
every city council in the state of Minnesota's hands.
Yep.
And it's even the state's hands. That will not change ever. So by making that statement that if the housing market tanks, that's market, that's selling, not taxing. Taxing doesn't change.
But if the housing market tanks, that's because the economy tanks, and then people are
But
gonna,
that does
it's gonna
not
be harder.
change the taxing.
But
It
the
will-
money that
so
people are
do-
gonna have to-
So when you go to a gas station and buy something, do you pay less in tax because the economy's tanked? No,
Your
you don't.
purchasing power goes down though, however.
Your dollar value goes down, but your taxing doesn't change.
But if everything
You have
else,
to understand that, you're gonna do something that's gonna come back and bite you all in the ass, and you're gonna regret it.
no, I'm saying that we should go a little bit more moderately with the
I-
reduction than I was hoping for originally, after just thinking more about the possible of the economy coming down and the possibility that people aren't gonna be making the money that they're gonna be making now. I mean, I think we need a little more cushion. I think the 4.4% reduction is a fair reduction, because at any time, anywhere, you're gonna have an inflationary cost, and I think people understand that. And it, I mean, if we're basically saying inflation was 4.42%, which it was more than that, but
was
we're
more
still
than that.
cutting enough so that they don't feel as much of the pressure, but we're not putting ourselves in a bad
Yeah,
spot.
I like scenario 6. If we're gonna do that, I think scenario 6 makes the most bang for your buck. We're not cutting our throats, we're getting by with things. We can setting this levy, we can lower it, we can't raise it.
Right.
So if we could say we're gonna base it off of scenario 6, and we can say, well, you know what, I can maybe shave a little more here from the end of September,
This-
then we can do that.
So that's the other thing is that, remember, there are numbers that we don't have yet that may negatively or positively affect, right? I don't know what all the different insurance renewals are going to be yet, right? I've based assumptions in. Health insurance could come in at 4, could come in at 44. Right now, I'm assuming 25, but that can make a difference. Workers' comp, property insurance, I mean, all those are still kind of up in the air, and so I would recommend, let's give ourselves a little bit of a cushion. I think that if we can see a reasonable path to 3.9, let's let it play out, because I'm not going to have, but I will not have health insurance renewal numbers until after we have certified the preliminary levy. It ain't going to happen.
Mayor Gordon mentioned at the last meeting about we're paying off the liquor store early. Is that money budgeted for this year? Is that payment, extra
This-
payment, or
you-
how you're doing it?
With this budget, you are deciding if we're going to. If we increase the transfer from the liquor store, which is what most of these scenarios have in them,
Okay.
then you're basically saying, we're not gonna pay these off early.
And what's the extra cost of us not paying it off early?
130,000,
Yeah, it was
130,000.
131,000
2029
at the
to
first call date.
2036, so
And of course,
18,000 a
it's-
year.
By then, you've already paid most of the interest at the front half and, you know,
Right.
standard amortization schedule stuff, so.
But
yeah,
that's
I
where
mean,
my confusion is, I guess, is that, because when you and I were talking in your office, when I first became mayor, we were talking about Public Works pushing that back. That was, we thought maybe potentially could save us 100,000 a year. The additional liquor store transfer, we're looking at 280 potentially, which you've only taken, you know, you haven't taken the full 280 in like scenario 1, where we were kind of asking for that to be shown. You know, that Fund 438 was 75, you know, and then that freeze on the Fund 920. And then the hiring freeze, I haven't added all that in here, but I'm just I'm not understanding why we're not seeing a bigger decrease or being more aggressive with it, I guess, is,
Well, my understanding is that the objective was,
because you're only looking at 166 and 166, so you're only talking 333,000 of, and Luke, I get what you're saying, but I think you're also, by making that argument, you're saying, well, we should tax more now so that we can save people more in the future. And that's what every politician in the history of the world has done, is we'll just take a little more now so we have it when we need it, and we'll just take a little more now, and then you just always take a little more now, and that's just, it never ends.
We're
So
still beating inflation though, I think. So that's a positive. I mean, I hate to say it, but
I don't think the residents care about
Right.
inflation.
They probably care more about it than you think, because that's affecting them, just like.
Well, I get that they don't care, that's not what I'm saying, I'm saying they don't care
They don't
to see it as an excuse.
yeah, that's fair.
Or we could take 3% off that and be right on track.
Right. I mean, I think for preliminarily, the 4.42 reduction is a good start. It doesn't leave us totally out to dry if, say, something comes in really high, like say health insurance goes up 40% instead of, what'd you predict, 25?
25, yeah.
I mean, then we're not totally out to dry. I don't think it's, I mean, yeah. I think there's a lot of things on like capital improvement stuff, that capital improvement plan that might be able to be shifted, or, I don't know. I think that's a fair start. Even
Yeah,
though
I think
I did want to have people not have to pay more in taxes. I wanted the number that they pay to be equivalent, but I don't know.
You'd have to drop it a lot more than 8%. You'd be dropping 20% plus.
Well, 8.8% is what he said.
Yeah,
But that's city's portion. County, school district, those all are numbers that, there ain't nothing any of us can do to change that at all. So when you look at it, you'd have to drop this 30% for the people not to have to pay any more in taxes.
I mean the city portion.
We're
Yeah,
just
yeah,
talking
we
city
would,
portion.
to break it even.
No, just our city portion, I mean.
I-
Say, if I paid $1,500 last year in the city portion, and then this year I see it's the same number, that's what my goal was. It wasn't to offset what the county or the school does, because we have,
But
Yeah, we can't do that.
you won't be able to do that.
I mean-
We could keep it, if we lower any portion on our side, doesn't matter. Your value of your property increases 10% on an average, sometimes 20%, sometimes 30%, sometimes 6%. That fluctuates. Anytime your property increases, you could have 0% tax increase, you're paying more in taxes when your property increases, automatically. Automatically, it goes up.
Yeah, we got that.
Yeah,
It's 8.8%
8.8%
on
is the
average this
average.
year that it's gone up. So that's what we're trying to figure out, is how do we get to that, to cover that 8.8% increase and have people pay at least the same dollar, actual real dollars as they did last year, so they're not actually paying anything more.
city portion.
Right, on the city portion. We're not looking to try to offset county or school board taxes, but yeah, I mean, I just have to be able to get in your office and see, I can't see that. So, yeah, I was hoping for a little more, material to dig through here on this tonight, but I probably would understand, and I'd probably have a better feeling of like, okay, well, if I ask this question, or we change it like this, or change it like that, I mean, I can work with you through that stuff to kind of get what I was actually hoping to see myself, but I'd have to be somewhere where I can see the screen and actually read it without, that kind of thing, so. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine start, I just don't think it's reaching the goal that we were hoping to get to.
that's fair.
But I mean, if what he has to set it now, we have.
Well,
to
not
look at-
today, the
Yeah, I know, but
19th,
it's-
yeah.
But it's, if we say that we want to set it at that,
Yeah,
say scenario 6, at the 4.4, whatever it is, we set it at that point, we can always go down from that.
Right, yeah.
So we could set that in stone today, but that isn't actually what's gonna happen at the end of the year. We just can't go over that amount.
Mm-hmm.
So setting that, it's always better to set high than look way too low and then get bit and butt.
Or is it better to set it low and force yourself to actually follow through?
That isn't necessarily always gonna happen.
It's gonna happen if you set it at that, it's gonna happen one way or another.
Right?
So you tell me that if your product goes up in your restaurants, you're not gonna raise your prices to anybody, right? If your products go up, your products go up.
What does that have to do with
Well,
what we're talking
It
about?
has everything to do with it. It's the exact same thing. If something else happens, we don't have a choice. We have to take care of it. So what I'm saying is, if your product goes up, that you have to purchase it, you're not gonna pass that on to your consumer?
No, of course I would.
Okay, plain and simple, you answered the exact same question. If we set this levy at this point, you can't say, I'm gonna force myself to do that, because something could happen. What
His
happens if the
point-
well burns out tomorrow, and we don't have any choice in the matter? So where's that money gonna come from?
Well, the water fund.
It's not everything is, I'm just using that for an example, but if that happens, what are you going to do? You can't cut your nose off to spite your face, is what I'm trying to tell you.
The point that we had made earlier is that house values go up every year. So our budget goes up every year. Even if we keep the levy the same, it's going up. So last year, if you paid $500 in city taxes, because your property value increased, now you're paying $550. So your tax rate went up, even though our levy never did. So what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to go by
I
last
know
year's.
what you're trying to do.
Right,
But
but
you know
you're-
what's funny? My city portion of my tax did not increase, but my counties and my school districts went up 28%. My city portion did not increase.
Then your house values didn't increase.
Yeah, it did. My taxes went from $3,800
Well, then
to
the math doesn't
$4,600.
work.
My city portion did not increase. But my
I'll
county
look it
and
up
school
online
did.
and see. It doesn't make sense to me. It should have.
The city portion should have increased last year, right? At the end of the year last year, with some of the changes we made, we lessened the amount of the increase by like $116 on the average household. So we lessened the amount of the increase at the end of the year last year, which was something, but it still went up, right?
It always depends on the ratio between tax rate and your home value, right? So tax rate goes down 4%, you break even if your home went up 4%. That's the point where tax dollars are the same. This is why we're
Speaking of the
saying that we
average
need,
property, yeah.
that's why we're saying is if the average market rate increase, right, I didn't finish my basement, no second levels. The average market rate increase on residential property is 8.8% increase, based on what the county reported to the state. We need the tax rate to go down 8.8, then you're even. If you paid 500 last year, you would then pay 500. That's math. That's how that works. And of course, we might not actually have anybody in the city that had exactly 8.8, but in aggregate,
Gonna vary.
so. But we do have to, I mean, I do need, in the end, tonight, I do have to have some direction on, because I do have to draft documents and resolutions. We're gonna have to approve something at the next meeting. If we don't, then we are calling a special meeting, because it has to go by the 30th.
Okay, Matt, I have a question for you. So the grader, you had one in mind that we were planning on purchasing, correct? And if we forego that, that would probably not be for sale by the year after.
No.
Okay, so,
The city, it belongs to the city of Forest Lake. They
Yep.
ordered a new grader. Their grader came in. They're holding that grader for us
us,
until the first
okay.
of the year.
okay, so I would not be in favor of holding that one. I know I want to reduce taxes, but that's a deal that you're not gonna get again on something that's very useful. So as far as like scenario.
I mean, if we've gotten that deal one time before, from a local community, I would assume that we
Could again,
could potentially
potentially.
get a deal like that
Yeah.
again.
It's just a little risk, but yeah, you're right. I don't,
But either way, all these scenarios are essentially the same, I mean, except for 4 and 5, basically, where you're not doing the big transfer and you're not seeing the reduction in the rate. But as far as the end result, we're getting there to the same point. I'm just not real satisfied with the point that we've gotten to. And I just would have to see the work to see where we're at, I guess. I don't understand how we can see all of these things that we're cutting and not realize those savings, sooner than later, so. And I guess the other part of it is, how does this affect ongoing years? So it's hard for me to make a decision and say, okay, well, yeah, this looks great, but I don't know what next year looks like, or the year after that, or the year after that, so. And we weren't provided with that information here tonight, so. I mean, if you don't put the 166 in the fund balance, I mean, how much more do we need to add to the levy? Let's see, so, I mean, we're shooting for 347,000, so I mean, we could hit that 347 if we don't contribute to fund balance and we transfer a little bit more from the liquor store. Those two little changes on, really, I mean, and you're not, even on your scenario 6 there, you're only transferring, what, finally 519, so you're, yeah. But all of them, basically, you could say, okay, well, instead of splitting the savings between fund balance and the levy reduction, you could get to that 347 pretty quickly, even with what you've got worked out here. But, I mean, the reason I wanted to see the increase in fund balance was because of what you said, that at some point, you'd like to be able to fall back on that if you need it, so.
So if we just simply take the 166,650, which does get us to the 4.42, and you just simply move that out of fund balance, put that into the levy reduction instead, you do come up a little bit short of that 8.8, so we'd have to get a smidge more, make the math work out.
Which you could take from that extra 124 on your liquor store cash flow.
I bet that this is not anything more than. These keys are in the same place. Tax rate change. Yeah, so even just an extra 10 after that gets you fractions of a percent
Mm-hmm.
from that. So 15,000 after that would get you right on to 8.8.
But that would drop the fund balance.
Then you have,
Oh, yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
contribution to fund balance. The only way you contribute in that budget is you simply do better than budgeted.
Right.
So how, when you're running these scenarios, I mean, how does, you know, if you're gonna do something like that, then what does that look like for the following years? I mean, are we able to maintain that reduction, or how does that come into play there?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the hard part isn't, you know, we can project that it can work, right? But the issue gets to be is can we really keep up with our own inflation, right? I mean, this is the other problem is I mean, like, legal services, engineering services, professional services, I mean, it's really standard, even a low inflation economy, for them to up rates 4 or 5%. Well, if inflation is 2% and they're going 4 or 5, yeah, maybe they show some restraint in a high inflation economy and still do 4 or 5, but yeah, it's the math of all those components. What's
Well, I
gonna
mean, I think
happen
you have
with
to grow,
workers?
you have to be a growing city, which we have been to this point, so. But yeah, I think that's, the answer to that is you grow your way into the additional income, and then you spend it on the services that you have to provide, but it doesn't always work out that way, as you have, you know, if you have other things come into play where you don't see the growth that you're hoping to see and that kind of thing, but.
Which is a scary part about where the economy's headed, I think.
Mhm.
That's the more I think about, the more.
But I think
nervous I'm
you have next year, and I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but I mean, I would assume that you have all of these new properties, a lot of new properties that have come online in the last 2 years that are not really being taxed at the full value yet, and they will be probably starting next year or the year after.
Yeah,
Right.
as a general rule, and it's not like a hard, fast thing, but basically, what happens on January 2nd is for next year,
Mhm.
right? So if there's a CO on a new house, and there's actually, you know, it's actually built, it can actually be occupied on January 2nd, then you would see that in value the next year. So it's always kind of a 1 year behind.
So we should see some value that we haven't realized quite
yeah.
yet and
Yeah.
stuff that, yeah.
Yeah, there will be additions. I mean, that's largely what we're seeing on this one, right? We've got total market value change of 11%, but only 8 of it is residential market value.
Mhm.
I mean, basically, your difference is new builds,
Yeah.
homes that weren't there and businesses that weren't there. That's where your difference comes.
Well, I don't know, I mean, if you have to have some direction tonight, you're thinking?
It's gonna be, yeah, I mean, we have to approve a preliminary levy by resolution, and we have to be able to, I mean, we kind of have to be able to prepare that. You can, I mean, I guess we could fill in the blank. Yeah, that would
can
not.
I guess I'd like to
for-
have more information. It's really hard to make a decision and not see ongoing years of what that will look like based off of decisions that we make today. And like I said, just seeing more of the work of how do we get to that spot is kind of what I was hoping for. And so I don't know if we can kind of delay a decision a little bit until the 19th on giving you some direction, if we can fill in the blank on it. But, I mean, my initial gut reaction to this is, well, that's not anywhere close to what I was hoping to see. But I think with this couple of small tweaks, it could be, but.
We can have resolutions for the preliminary levy information on the council agenda. Right now, we have the budget work session planned for at 5 o'clock. We're pushing COW to later, and so we can have a discussion. Will we have planning commission? For an hour, and then we'll have planning commission, could potentially go back, have more discussion at council, but we can leave the blanks empty, but we will have to fill them in that meeting. Or the other option is to call a special meeting to add in that next week after. But
I won't
my
be,
recommendation would be to leave it on the 19th and to have individual council members come sit down, talk with Mike prior to next meeting.
I won't
Yeah.
be here on the 19th, if that makes a difference.
Can you Zoom?
I don't, at
It can only
5,
be for certain medical
Yeah.
issues by statute to Zoom anymore.
yeah, it's
Really?
not-
I thought I had been gone for something not too long ago, and I was working or something like that, and,
That was during COVID, so,
well, even last year,
yeah.
was it?
Can we change that under our own city policy ordinance?
No, it's just by
Resolution?
statute.
Okay.
What if you have 2 to 2 at that meeting?
We'll have to call a special meeting.
You wanna just plan on a special meeting now, or what do you think?
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know what's gonna happen on
Okay.
the 19th.
All right,
I guess for me personally, I think starting at the 4.42% is a safe number. I realize that you want to go more, but I mean, I think we're pretty frugal as a council, so we can still wither away at it. Doesn't mean we're set in stone. I don't think, but that's where I'm probably gonna end up voting on it. So I think that's a good start. I mean, I trust
That's
Mike.
just setting it.
Yeah.
We just can't go above it.
Right.
I mean,
And that still gives us wiggle room for if insurance goes up a lot, things that we can't predict, like Steve was saying with the price of ingredients. If your ingredients go up, you can't really do nothing about it. You know, if insurance goes up, workman's comp goes up, we can't really do anything about it. So if we go, say we want to drop 8.84%, but then what if insurance, workman's comp, everything goes up way more than he's anticipating, and then we're Scrooged, you know, we can't go higher, but we can still work our way down. I think
It's not saying that that's what we're doing. We're not
Right.
doing
No, I know.
4 point whatever.
I think that's
We're
a
not doing that. We just can't go over that.
I just wanna get us locked into that, reaching that goal is
I
my
understand that
point.
for sure.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but that isn't what we need to do at this moment.
Yeah.
So when would you know the workman's comp and the variables? You probably want to know all those till the end of the year?
Yeah, it won't be before we have to do this.
Okay.
I mean, that's just how that goes. Yeah, and I would also remind councils, I'm happy to meet with everybody. Depending when people can meet, I may very well be asking you to meet in the evening, though. I have been working 2 jobs this entire time, and now I'm working 2 jobs and training a new staff. So my time during the workday is exceptionally limited currently, so,
Did you say at the end of the workday?
what's that?
Your time is limited at the end of the workday?
My time, of my availability during the workday is incredibly limited, so just to keep the minimum finance stuff moving forward currently is a challenge, so.
Well, and you've been doing double duty as a utility and billing clerk for,
Basically that during the day and
month
nights and
and a half,
weekends
yeah.
as the finance director is how that's
Yeah.
worked out. And
Yeah.
I'm not keeping up, but keeping up enough to meet statutory obligations. How about that?
Well, I say we set it at the 4 point, whatever he's got on there.
I think that's a fair
And set
start.
it at that, and we can work, chisel away. I don't disagree. Everybody wants to see lower taxes. I'm just telling you, don't bite off something you aren't gonna wanna chew. You gotta be precautious on it. We did that once before when the economy took a tank in here, and we ended up paying for it for the last 6 years of it. And it cost us more money by doing that. And it cost the taxpayers more money by doing that.
Mayor Gordon, I'd like you to meet with Mike. I'm really going to try to schedule something with Mike. I just never know when I'm gonna get off of work, so I'll definitely keep you on the top of my list to call every day I get off early and see if you can squeeze me in, because I have quite a few different little scenarios that might change this.
And I have a potentially big idea that might change it as well that I'd like to talk to you more about.
In the meantime, yeah, I'm definitely not going any less than 4.4. I'd like to see that 8.8 if it's feasible, but I'll go over a few things that I'm thinking of. You can look at your outlook on it for the next 10 years that you need to look out at. and-
yeah, I just think without seeing how the future kind of unfolds, it's hard to make a decision on this, yeah.
And what's the minimum amount we put in the rainy day fund each year? Are we even,
It's whatever we budget.
Huh?
It's whatever we budget.
Right now,
What
it's
is it?
at 37% or 43?
It's at least 43.
43. So how much, like, that's another question that, I mean, as we go forward and look through the future years here, but I mean, that 166, I mean, what percentage does that get us to I mean, is that a big jump in fund balance percentage-wise? I mean, I suppose if you're, it's not much really, is it?
It's not a huge amount,
No.
and it depends on what you end up setting next year's budgeted
Right.
expenditures at.
Right.
That ends up being. part
Not
of the
much of a percentage,
That ends
yeah.
up being part of the division, so. Yeah,
I don't wanna touch that part of the budget. I think it's very important to have money set aside. I just,
Is this money?
was wondering how
yeah,
much
the
it was.
the simpler way to think, I mean, because when we talk about those percentages, right, it's always, you kind of find out about after the fact, and then it's based on next year's budget expenditure. So you're, at any given time, you're never quite seeing the time frame you really want, no matter how bad you want to see it at that time frame. The easier way to think about contributions to fund balance is, if I put in 166,650 next year or the year after, I have 166,650 I can take back out. Right? I mean, it's, you know, think of it in those terms rather than trying to understand that precise percent of the budgeted expenditures, because that is difficult. The timing on those is never quite how anybody ever would like it to be. You always find out, you know, like we talked about before, is if we really started contributing to fund balance and we really got to a point where we were absolutely humming along, I would tell you to pump the brakes at 60%, because otherwise, by the time we figure out we're near 70, we'd clear sail right over it by the time we even knew it happened. So, it's easier to think about it in those terms. Is 166 today is 166 that's available in a down economy.
All right, well, I mean, what do you want to do here then? So what do you want for direction from us? You want to just fill in the blanks when we get down to the nitty-gritty next meeting, or what?
Where we can hash it out. We'll
Yeah,
have a
we
little
could-
more
we-
time
yep.
next meeting. Hate to drag it on, but I think we need to.
I mean, otherwise, you want to just kind of go with this? I mean, we can obviously make changes still at the next meeting too, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, remember, I mean, well, in the past, we've always adopted a preliminary budget, but in the end, it's that preliminary levy that is the thing
Right.
that is required by statute.
I mean,
I mean,
you want us to
generally
kind of pick a general scenario? I mean, I still like scenario one of all the, I mean, if you're gonna try to kind of put a preliminary budget together, that's the one that I still would,
Yeah,
you know, with all of those things that we talked about, but.
if that was the consensus, we could do that. And we've got then a number we can plug in as the levy and move forward with that and just continue to work. It's also gonna be, you know, as each month goes by here, we get through September and we get through October, it's going to be a lot easier for me to find time, right? We get that meter replacement project done, I get my staff up to speed and humming along on their own. That is gonna give me more of an opportunity to be speaking with you guys and make me more available at a wider range of times and days, so.
And you'll have more information on what stuff's gonna cost next year.
That too, because it's generally, health insurance would generally come in first week or 10 days of October would generally be when that would get sent to us, so.
I mean, otherwise, I mean, realistically, I mean, I don't know, it's just hard for me to, I just don't have enough information to work from. Which I wish I would have had a chance to look at this sooner, and then I could have called and asked you about it, but I didn't really have much time this last couple of weeks to look at it until this afternoon, so. But I mean, I think we're not far off from that 347, you know, we don't, whether it goes to the fund balance or whether it goes to the levy reduction, you know, we're pretty close to getting there, but I don't know, I mean, maybe scenario 6 is a better option, I just haven't
Well,
seen the work to know, you know what I mean, so.
Some of what's gonna have to happen here is, as a council, I mean, you're gonna have to decide how important is the fund balance and how important is the tax rate, because if we say we want, you know, 166,000 and we want negative 8.8, that's, I mean, I'm gonna say, that's gonna be challenging. I mean, that's,
Yeah, and I, the 166, I don't know if that was, I mean, the idea would be to create, you know, to where we have some of this savings, but like I said, I thought we would, when I'm doing my math here, I got way more savings than 333,000 that we should be looking at, you know what I mean, so.
Yeah,
So that's where I just have to see kind
I
of where you're at.
crafted these scenarios based on my understanding of the last meeting that I had attended, that we were that this was what we were looking at. We had wanted to split the difference, we wanted a contribution to fund balance, and we wanted to reduce the tax rate. So I crafted these scenarios, if they could do it, to hit those numbers. So it wasn't that that was the limit of any particular scenario, it was, it will hit those scenarios. And when I got to those metrics, stop, that's it. That was my understanding, is that that's what council had wanted to see.
Sure.
And so here you find out which scenarios can get there and which scenarios cannot. This is how that goes.
Okay.
Since I won't be here, I can't make a recommendation or what I'd want to vote at that meeting, can I? Or how does
You
it?
can't share how you would vote at a meeting. You could give your recommendation here based off what you have here, but
Okay.
you cannot say what you would vote for at the next meeting.
Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna err on the side of the 4.42 reduction for the preliminary levy personally, so take that with what you may, I guess.
Okay.
It's just preliminary. We can go down
Right.
less than that. You just gotta have something to start to give them. And what we actually do at the end is what matters. This is just, we just can't go over that.
Right.
We can't come back and say, okay, we wanna raise it 5%, go to, 4 point, we can't do that. We're setting it at the 4.42, that's what we're gonna do. And we can go under that, we just can't go over that.
And I'm just saying, I think we could get to that 347.
And then we can do that, but that's not what he's asking for right now.
Yeah. Fill in the blanks on the 19th, and I don't know. Any other discussion, any other thoughts?
Good job with some creative solutions, I think. I think there's lots of options there for us to work with. So, that's good.
All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn if anybody's ready to go.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
I have a motion to adjourn from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We are adjourned.